Happy New Year to all of you. This is our first webinar for FIATech in 2010, and we're really glad to see all of you join us this Tuesday morning for a discussion about user acceptance of mobile IT that Neill Pawsey and Andy May from the UK will be presenting. So with that, let me introduce Neill Pawsey, who's the current program manager for the COMIT organization in the UK. Prior to this, he spent 10 years managing a small and dedicated IT support team looking after Jackson Civil Engineering Group's core computer network systems and software. He's got over 20 years of experience working for various construction companies in a number of IT management and project-related roles. He progressed from first, second, and third line support jobs to the project management of larger and more technically challenging projects. He's also, a graduate of the bachelor's degree in construction management from Anglia Ruskin University and is currently undertaking a 4-year engineering doctorate at Loughborough University. He's a member of the British Computer Society and has a wide range of skills and experience, including doing some project management for some of our FIATech projects as well. He is co-presenting today with Andrew May, who is a research fellow at the Ergonomics and Safety Research Institute at Loughborough University. He's working with a team to investigate user-driven innovation within support. Other ongoing research projects are investigating the user issues of IT within the construction industry and the human factors issues to do with new technology within vehicles. So with that, thank you very much, Neill and Andy, for joining us today, and I will turn this over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, thanks everybody for your time today. It's good afternoon from here in the UK and Europe, and good morning to you guys over there in the US. I'll be leading today's presentation together with Andy. Andy's going to be more of a passive participant, but I will call on him every now and again to help me as we go along the way. And we'll be free, both of us, to answer any questions you may have. Well, the agenda for today, I'm hoping by the end of the call today, you'll have a much better understanding of what it is we are trying to achieve with this project. A little bit about the history of the project. It's been running a while now. I've certainly had more than a 2 to 3 year association with this project. Where we are right now with the latter phases of the project, we'll give you a small insight into some of the results that we've had from a recent questionnaire that we've got, but more importantly, one of the main purposes of today is to get your participation. As I've mentioned before, we obviously welcome your questions, but more specifically, we really do welcome your constructive feedback from what you see today. The latter parts of this project do require us to undertake some interviews, which we will transcribe. We'll also need access to case studies, real-world exercises where mobile IT is being used. And both Andy and I would be delighted to work with any FIATech or COMIT member who's able to assist us. I thought a good start, bringing up from the bottom, would be to give you an idea about what COMIT is. Some of you may or may not have seen our logo or seen that we're associated with FIATech in some way. We're an organisation that was initially funded by the UK government's Department of Trade and Industry and was formed in 2002. We ran for 2 years under UK government auspices, and since 2004 our members decided that we should become an industry-owned organisation, based much in the same way as FIATech. Our main purpose, as the top line suggests, is to learn from experience to deliver measurable business benefits. But more than that, we are a community of industry participants that represent construction, technology, research and dissemination organisations. A lot of people have described us in the past as a dating agency, which is a bit of a facetious description, but I can't think of a better one. The idea is that we share risk. We are an organisation or a collection of organisations that come together to demonstrate, trial and disseminate information about or promote information about the use of mobile IT in the construction industry. This is an insight into our list of members. We currently have about 40 construction and technology and research-based members. Some of you may recognize some of those logos. Some of you who are called in today may even be members of some of those organizations. But you'll see that the demographic represents larger companies, smaller companies, some high-end technology companies, and some smaller companies as well. This gives you a flavor of some of the projects that we are currently running at the moment. Since 2002, we've conducted over 15 or 16 case studies and full demonstration projects. Although our focus in the past has been principally around hardware like PDAs and other mobile devices right up to toughened laptops and tablet PCs, we are also interested in the broad diverse range of mobile hardware and mobile technology, and we also look at some enabling technologies such as how do you get rapidly deploy data and voice solutions to site, so connectivity being an issue, right up to some new technology for wireless sensors and RFID. At this point, I'm just going to briefly hand over to Andy because I'm not going to let him get away with saying nothing today. I thought I'd let Andy just introduce who Esri are and why they're involved in this project. Andy,
okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Neil, and good morning to everyone in the States. We are a research institute part of Loughborough University. We've been in existence in one form or another for about 20 years or so. There are two main areas of work that we are involved in. We're involved in work to do with vehicle safety, but also we do a lot of research into human factors of new technologies. So we're interested in understanding the requirements for new technologies and also assessing the impact of new technologies on people, either as consumers or as members of a workforce. We're very much a institute interested in getting our results out there in the real world. So we're not true academics in the sort of the pure sense of the word. We're kind of a cross between academics and consultants. So we apply, scientific academic principles to undertaking the work, but we're very much interested in the application of that to real-world problems and working with commercial companies to enable them to benefit from new technologies. So over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, well, I'd like to give a little bit of history about this particular project. And from my point of view, this goes right back to the first time I ever came to a FIATech event, which was back in Phoenix, Arizona, which I'm sure Nicole will correct me if I'm wrong, was about 2005, 2006. And the first group of people I happened to walk into in a meeting was the Capital Projects Roadmap Element 8 team. And we got talking and decided that there was a lot of alignment in some of the work that COMIT was doing and FIATech was doing in this particular element. And we started out on a journey to work together and to conduct some research together. So FIATech's Roadmap Element 8 is centered around the knowledge-enabled workforce and has a focus on the people implications of advancing and implementing technology, which is often described as the softer side of technology implementation, and perhaps that's what drew me to it in the first place. So, as I said, I mean, as far back as 2007, when we started to put this together more formally, both organizations had decided that this idea of user acceptance of technology was a critical factor affecting the success and failure of IT projects. And we agreed that both organizations would seek the best opportunities to understand how to effectively overcome these barriers to successfully implement the technology. And these kind of issues are things like the usability of the device, how you train people to use them, and change management. So why on earth does this matter? And I've been thinking of ways to try and encapsulate this. And I thought I'd do that by telling you a little story about a project that we ran in COMIT some years back, which illustrates the point. This particular member company was a construction company that had a maintenance division. And in that maintenance division, we had crews of guys in trucks going out doing maintenance on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment in buildings. And they operated in a fairly traditional way. That is, every morning they would arrive at the depot to pick up their truck and their worksheets and work assignments for the day. They would congregate around for maybe an hour, 45 minutes, As they're British, they probably drink a few cups of tea and have a chat, pick up their worksheets, go off, do the work for the day, return to that central depot, and then hand back in their completed worksheets. And this was perceived, quite understandably, that this was inefficient. And how could they improve this process? Well, the easiest way that was decided after some thought and discussion was that we should equip these particular people with a mobile device in the cab of their truck where they could receive their worksheets electronically the moment they turned the ignition and started work in the morning. And this was something that had been done in other industries and had proved to be successful, so it was kind of a no-brainer, and people thought this was a very good fit. So that's what they embarked upon in this company, and what I've illustrated here very crudely, I might add, is a simple graph of productivity over time, and the green line indicating how that productivity improved through the implementation of that technology. And sure enough, when they trained people and they got people to use it properly, it did improve productivity as they'd envisaged, but after a while, that productivity started to fall. And to be honest, people were absolutely mystified as to why that was. Some of the guys in the cabs were starting to resent the technology. They weren't happy. People were starting to leave the company. So I've represented that by that big square with a question mark in the middle. So people started to ask, retrospectively, well, what on earth had gone wrong? And two very interesting things had happened. The first thing was that the new system bypassed a very human method of information exchange. I joked about this sitting down and drinking tea and talking, but during that phase, when people came to the depot to pick up their works orders, they were having some quite, amongst the informal conversations, they were having some very important conversations about the work they were doing. And as such, they were enhancing their knowledge with regard to how they fix certain pieces of equipment and sharing experiences, and that had been bypassed. So people were unhappy about that. They didn't have access to their colleagues anymore. But something far more simple was happening, and that is that the people in the trucks felt lonely. They felt isolated and therefore felt resentful, and then they started to resent the technology, and then you're into a steady decline. And once you're into something like that, it can really be problematic to solve. So the question here was, could those kind of issues have been foreseen, and could they have been, could something have been done to negate them? What actually happened in this case was that they actually equipped the devices with access to a corporate intranet, which gave the crews the ability to communicate with each other and share information electronically. But more fundamentally, the company decided to impose a regime of monthly meetings when the crews would come together, and they'd make it informal, but it kind of made up for the fact that they were missing that interaction. And I've represented that, again, very crudely with the red line. So as soon as they took that remedial action, the productivity rose to the levels that they'd expected. But obviously there'd been a whole lot of wasted time and effort, well, not really wasted, but dead time in effect in trying to put that right. It's certainly my experience in working in the civil engineering industry that my role as an IT manager was certainly a challenging one, certainly from a technical perspective, and I wouldn't want to diminish that challenge. But if I could put it in percentage terms, I would say that was probably 10 to 20% of the role that I had, or challenge that I had. The major challenge was in addressing these issues of user acceptance, getting the guys to understand the technology, getting it implemented correctly, undertaking the correct change management procedures. And it was my contention at that time that these are issues that are often neglected, and it's a skill set that's often not acquired or taught to technical professionals in the industry. So what did COMIT and FearTech decide to do about this? Well, COMIT had acquired over the years an awful lot of experience in conducting case studies and evaluations of technology, and they had done some very good work in giving ideas of best practice with regard to the technology and the hardware, but probably hadn't put enough emphasis on these softer issues. FearTech also had a lot of experience in this place, specifically with some of the work it had done on smart chips and RFID. So we thought, well, between both organizations, we have a good pool, a good resource of material that we can use to look at, go back and look at and try and draw out some of these issues of user acceptance and change management. So we kind of kicked off a meeting in November 2006. We contracted Andy and his colleague Val Mitchell at Esri to write a report on us based upon their research. And they began reporting out in March 2007, and a final report was issued in September of 2007. And in fact, I presented the outcomes of that at FIATEC's member meeting in Minneapolis. So I want to talk a little bit about this early phase and about this report. Some of you may well have read it. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. It's freely available from, if you are a member, from FIATEC and COMIT. I'm sure either myself or Nicole would be happy to send that to you. So the report, as a deliverable, presented a summary of the lessons that both organisations had learned in relation to introducing mobile IT in the UK and, I should point out, the US construction industry. And the document itself outlined via a series of action points the main lessons that we had learned from experiences within both organisations. The scope of the report, it was basically broken down into a number of key points, and they covered those directly impacting on the end user and their acceptance of mobile IT. And although these issues can be broadly applied to any technology in the industry, it's perhaps more pertinent within construction and capital projects because mobile IT has an immediate impact upon the point of activity worker, who traditionally are from a craft skill background, so their issues of accepting the technology may be different from somebody perhaps who's been working in office and is familiar with computers generally. And as I pointed out there, most of the points in this report arguably are relevant to non-mobile IT and other industrial sectors. These points came directly from COMIT case studies and other related work, as I've said, but the report did not attempt in any way to summarise the wider research literature on user acceptance of mobile IT, or indeed to prescribe any suitable product development process. The report was basically broken down into three sections, which covered the main implementation process for mobile technology. So from getting started, coming up with the idea, examining the existing processes that you have and how they might be improved by that technology, together with how you might get that idea accepted before you even go to the point of running a pilot or even implementing the technology itself. And then it concentrated on how you specify the hardware and the systems and how you develop that. And then finally, right the way through to deployment, and covered issues such as training, running pilots, evaluating that, and then rolling it out at a larger scale. The intended audience for this report would be a US or a UK construction company, and if you're looking for guidance on how to implement mobile IT and you have no experience in this area, it might help you answer some of the following type of questions. You know, if I introduce this technology, am I likely to get it accepted before I take the risk of diving in and spending the money? Where might I fail, but perhaps more importantly, how can I get this right first time? And in fact, this report was very, very well received, and I can certainly remember a number of members of the COMIT organisation saying to me that, you know, they wished we'd done this kind of research earlier because it certainly would have assisted the successful completion of some of the case studies and projects that we ran within COMIT itself. As I said, the report is freely available, so you're free to go and download it and make your own judgment of what you find. But in summary, these were some of the report's findings. In principle, you should always think process first. We have a rule in COMIT that it's always process first, then technology, and I think what we found out from this report kind of confirmed that. It's very easy for, I guess, people like me who are very technology focused to get caught up down in the weeds with the technology itself and forget what that technology is actually trying to address. Another point was the involvement of end users at all stages. But remember that, you know, if they're a point of activity worker, they tend to be focused upon their job in hand, and they may not have a good understanding of how their business process fits in a wider business perspective. Often there's a suspicion when new technology is implemented that there's some darker reason why it's been put in place. The big brother analogy is always one that seems to be quoted by people. Oh, it just gives you more visibility of what I'm doing. You're using it to measure my performance, and therefore gives you an easy way to pay me less money, or gives you an easy way to get rid of me. And while some of that may be true, there's always a wider business purpose and objective putting that technology in place, and that's not always well communicated. The third paragraph I really like, actually, and I now use the metaphor quite a lot, but we talk about this idea of shiny shoes, not dirty boots. Certainly from our experience in COMIT, we have many technology companies who may not have any experience of our industry in capital projects. And the way I like to describe it is, if you were in your site office and a guy turns up in his nice slick suit and shiny shoes, you're going to make a judgment about that particular person, i.e. he doesn't really understand what we do here. If he did, he wouldn't turn up in his suit and shiny shoes. And this is a metaphor for a much bigger problem that we encounter in COMIT, is that we have many technology companies who come into construction and capital projects and don't understand the industry, don't understand the peculiar way we operate, and if only they would take the time to understand that, that would be beneficial not only to the construction company or the capital projects company in implementing that technology, but in the technology vendor in being able to more successfully sell to the industry. The last point is general, and it's very important, is that you should always be open-minded in all respects. Do your analysis, and then let the best solutions emerge from that thorough and detailed analysis. So that was phase one. I mentioned the scope of that original report, and we did feel that perhaps we needed to take this research a bit further. And if we were going to do that, we needed to give it a little bit more academic rigor, and also ask a few more questions in a far more structured way in order to come to the right conclusion. So we initiated phase two of this research, and that's kind of broken down into two parts. The first is a user acceptance questionnaire or survey, which many of you may have seen. Many of you may indeed have contributed to the survey. Andy and I have been working over the last few months to analyze some of the data that we've had back from that survey. And what I'd like to do in this section of the presentation is share with you some of the results that we've had, give you an insight into the methodology that we've used to try and make sense of that information. And as I've suggested, the reason we're showing you this is that we want to produce a report in a few months' time that's going to be of benefit and use to you as members of this organization. And we can only do that really by being led and being given good feedback by yourselves as to whether we are doing things right and whether we're doing the right things here. So I'm going to begin by talking about the purpose of the questionnaire that we've done. And basically we wanted to provide a more up-to-date snapshot of the current state of use of mobile IT in the UK and US construction industries. How big has the uptake been? What is mobile IT being used for? And what is mobile IT being used effectively for? But more specifically, is it fulfilling its potential? And what are the factors that influence success in regard to its implementation and adoption? What are the significant barriers to adoption with mobile technology in that context? And perhaps more importantly, for future work, and as future lessons and information that's of value to you, is where should we apply effort to overcome these barriers? And we designed this questionnaire in a number of ways, but we also thought, well, if your organization was prepared to contribute to the questionnaire with a significant number of employees, we could produce a selected set of results of this questionnaire that may be of interest to you. So we can dice the data and take it out and isolate it just for your company. And in fact, there's certainly one or two companies who have participated within the UK who are very interested in that, and it gives them a good insight into their own workforce and some of the projects that they've done. I would point out that this questionnaire is still live. Andy and I made a deliberate decision to keep it open. It's a living set of data. You can add to it any time. We would encourage you to participate and contribute to it, and I'll let you know a little bit later on about how you can do that. So Andy and I said about designing that questionnaire, we wanted to make it as simple and systematic as possible and based around the goals and objectives that I set out in the previous slide. So the questionnaire is basically broken down into 4 parts. The first part is your normal demographic questions, which enables us to chop the data up in any number of ways to analyze it in quite a flexible way. The second part of the questionnaire is around mobile IT and its uptake and whether it's fulfilling its potential. What is it being used for? What process issues is it being used to address? And what benefits are being seen? Part 3 gets interesting from our point of view because it's where we are trying to identify or get people to describe in their own words their experiences regarding the barriers and also the enablers for the implementation of mobile IT. And then part 4 is we also ask people, again in their own words, to give us the benefit of their experience and some ideas about how things could be done better with regard to best practice. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into how many people participated. I'm going to give you an insight into the demographics that we've had back. So here are some of the key participants we had on the questionnaire. Some large companies, a lot of them are UK-based, Bechtel aside, and these are the companies that are probably going to be interested in a selected subset of the results. But we also had 35, there or thereabouts, other UK and US companies who contributed. So when we took this snapshot, the sample size was about 170 individual results. The demographics in terms of geography, most, as you can see, were in the UK, with the next biggest section being in the USA. And then there were some other contributors from Europe and also in the Far East. The next question that we asked people was, what was the primary role of the organisation? And based upon this sample at that particular snapshot, this gives you an idea of the answers to those questions. So by far the largest group were general contractors in construction, also EPCs. The next biggest was probably trade or specialist subcontractors within the same industry. And then also there were others like consultants, architects and engineers. Now that was good from our perspective because that was the group that we were really interested in. But it's interesting to see that we also had responses, and we did encourage it, from IT suppliers and IT consultants, people who are selling this technology, because they often have a lot of very valuable experience in trying to get their hands dirty in this industry. So we were pretty happy with the demographic we got back in this regard. The next question we asked was where people work during a typical week. Now this is a question about mobility, and this was very important to us because the kind of people who interested us the most were those people who you could argue were truly mobile. And from this chart here, you can see that most of the results we had back, or at least 50% from what you can see in that piece of the pie, were based at a fixed or permanent office. But what probably the subset that we were most interested in is that sort of pinky red slice off to the top right, which was described as people who worked at a range of different project sites, including flexible workers. So we probably would have been happier if that had been a bit larger. That's, again, one of the reasons why we've kept the questionnaire open. So perhaps we can encourage more people from that particular sector to contribute. But I think for the purposes of our analysis, that slice was probably big enough. The next demographic question we asked was, what level of responsibility did people have? Again, this was important because one of the things we are trying to explore is differences in attitudes dependent upon seniority within the company. And again, probably the most interesting area from our point of view is that slice of the pie off to the right-hand side, that kind of dark yellowy brown colour, where people who insisted that they do not manage others, because that kind of implies people who are at the point of activity and probably a big target group for this particular technology. So the bigger slices of the pie, from what we see here, are probably more senior and middle management. And that's not to say that their feedback isn't valuable, because it is, because we are interested in their views as well. But from a mobile IT point of view, it probably would have been nicer to be at a slightly larger piece of the pie on the right-hand side. The next question concerned what people were using their mobile device for. Now, with most of these slides, I'm just giving you a little snippet. I'm giving you a very brief insight into the data. So some of the process issues you see listed along the bottom of the graph are just a snapshot of the kind of process issues that we were looking at. But I'm just showing this to illustrate some of the things we were asking and some of the results that we'd had. So if you look at this chart, the ones we've got here, if you look at design work here, we're seeing that most people are still using a standard laptop and tablet PC. And what is interesting about this from our analysis, that we discovered that it wasn't so much a mistake, but it was something we had to address here, is that, of course, people are more likely to be using a laptop, and perhaps what we were more specifically interested in were the ruggedized tablet PCs, so excluding probably those tall orangey bars. And we are able to do that within the software that we're using to analyze this by, and this is the beauty of the demographic questions, is that we can exclude those or include them in our analysis to see any correlation. And you'll see why the idea of having a laptop removed is important in the next slide. Because the next question we asked was, how often do you use your mobile device as part of your work? And when we said use your mobile device, we do not mean using it as a phone, and that's important. Now you can see that big slice of the pie, over 50%, that said continuous or frequent use during the day. Now if you include the use of laptops, that of course is very big, because most people are going to be using laptops continuously and frequently at their desk, so there's not a lot of value in that. So what we're able to do is, by removing those laptop users from this, is to make this information a lot more of interest to us. And in fact, in so doing, we're still seeing that even if you take out the laptop users, that mobile devices in other categories are being used continuously or frequently by those people who answered the questionnaire, and that was good to see, which meant we were on the right track. Now, as well as these sort of more quantitative questions, we did ask for some qualitative data responses, and we did ask people to put things in their own words. And what was particularly pleasing from Andy and my point of view was that a lot of people took the time when producing or answering the questionnaire to write down things in their own words. On this particular slide, I've given you an example of a question we asked people as to what they thought the benefit was of using that technology. And here are some of the answers that we've got. So we had a lot of very, very good text results. I'm not going to dwell too much on what you see on the screen. I'm sure you can read that and take that on board yourself. But I would like to talk to you about this. Andy and I spent a lot of time discussing what we would do with this data. How could we make sense of it? How could we draw out some constructive themes that we could explore later in our report? So we needed some quantitative methodology that was rigorous enough and valid enough so that we could draw some sensible conclusions. So what we decided to do was make a distinction between people who are talking about benefits and people who are talking about capabilities, because when you have a mobile device, it can do one of those two things. It can certainly give you the ability to do something where you didn't have that ability before, but you still might not perceive that to be a true benefit. So in order for us to make sense of whether people were talking about benefits or capabilities, we had to take apart the wording as they had stated it. And what we decided to do was to break it down into fragments that could be analysed, because often people were saying 4 or 5 things, 3 or 4 things within one sentence. So we took the wording as stated and we broke them down into those fragments, and this is what we did as an example. So this person here has said that the mobile technology gives him or her the ability to take information out of the office onto site, store large volumes of information, gives them clarity of data capture through the use of images rather than written text, and gives them the ability to distribute that data instantly. Now, that person is saying a number of things here, so we simply break it down into 4 things. 1, he or she is saying they have the ability to take information out of the office onto site. 2, gives them the ability to store large volumes. 3, there's the clarity of data. And 4, this instant distribution of data. And we tried to apply this to every statement that was given to us in this particular question. So we then took that text fragment as stated. We tried wherever we were to stay true to what people had said. There is an inherent danger in research that you can try and draw out things from what people are saying in your own words, or there's a danger that we have. Andy and I had an idea what they meant, and we put it in our own words. So we've tried wherever we can to stay true to what people have said. So with regards to capabilities and benefits, we said, was this person clearly stating a benefit? Were they clearly stating a capability? Did they state nothing at all? Were they stating both? Or were they saying that there was no benefit or capability? And we used those 5 simple categories with each text fragment. Now, we used a piece of software called SPSS to do statistical analysis, and this chart here is just, again, a snapshot of some of the results we had. Now, this particular one is for the analysis on the first text fragment, and in this case you can see that, and this is, I can tell you this is true for most of the other text fragments, although we need to do some consolidation, is that most people are talking about a capability rather than a benefit. And I've tried to illustrate this a little bit more clearly in this sort of simple pie chart. So you can see that I think it's 43% were by and large saying that it was they gave them a capability, and a smaller percentage, 16%, were saying that there was a clearly stated benefit. Then what we decided to do was to analyse the capabilities that they were stating and try and put them into some simpler categories. And what we decided to do was split the capabilities into a capability that involved collaboration, one that involved communicating, and one that involved interacting with information. It wasn't as easy as it may sound. There were a number of them that still remained unresolved, and at this stage we've kind of put those into an unresolved pot, which we're going to be analysing in more depth later on. And here's an idea again. This was on text fragment 1 about what those results were. So a lot of what was being discussed seems to be around communicating and interacting with information. Collaborating seems small, but it has been difficult because some things implied in communicating and interacting with information have a link to collaboration, and we need to do a little bit more analysis there. And again, I've tried to show this more clearly in percentage terms. So then we had the problem of analysing what people were saying in terms of stating a benefit. So if they clearly stated a benefit, we decided to keep that as true as we could to their own words. So here again is a very simple chart showing what people were saying in terms of benefits. That table is quite large, so you're probably just seeing the top part of the sample. And Andy and I need to do some work to consolidate these into key themes that we need to explore a bit later on in the research. But from what you can see there, and Andy and I were having a conversation about this the other day, there's a lot of talk about the benefit of being able to work flexibly, words like flexibility and freedom are quoted an awful lot. Now, this may not be rocket science, this may be what we expected to see anyway, but in this list, and there may be 20 or 30 different quotations here, we may be able to consolidate these into 2, 3, 4, 5 key themes that we can explore in a little bit more detail. Then we asked people from the other side of the coin to talk about drawbacks. And this was very interesting because on one hand, lots of people were saying, well, this technology gives me the benefit to work flexibly and work from home, but the same people often were saying, but that kind of means too much work at home and too much work in my own hours, and that's probably one of the most interesting things I've seen from these results. So here's a sample of some of the drawback statements. Again, I won't go into too much detail. You can read them on the screen here. You can read them when you look at the slides later on. And we did a similar analysis with the full wording we got for drawbacks and broke those down into text fragments. And again, here's an insight into some of the open text responses that we got back from that. And we were able to go a little bit further with this. These were some of the key themes that seemed to come out. Impact on home life seemed to be something that was stated a lot. Poor connectivity problems, issues around hardware performance, software performance, the portability of the device, and from an ergonomic point of view, the ability to input information on or look at information, interact information on what in essence is a very small screen. Towards the end of the questionnaire, we asked people to have a look at best practice. And in this particular section, again, this is not an exhaustive list. You're probably seeing a sample of 4 or 5 out of 20 particular best practices that Andy and I listed. And we asked people to answer that in a number of ways, that whether they thought, for instance, having access to power users or product champions during implementation was important. So did they think it was important, or did they not think it was important, or if they were unable to comment. But more importantly, whether they thought it was important but was being tackled satisfactorily within their own company, or it was important but it was being tackled satisfactorily within their company. And here is a broad sample without any demographic split. And what we were able to do with the SPS software was look at some of the demographics and analyze them in a little bit more detail. And what we were specifically looking for, if we break it down here, this particular graph is by job function. And this goes back to what I was saying previously, is attitude. So this is end user involvement. So whether people think it's important, whether they think it's being tackled satisfactorily or unsatisfactorily. And if you look at the top here, here's an IT manager or the IT managers, and they appear to be saying it is important and it is being tackled satisfactorily. But if you look at somebody who's down on the front line, a site engineer, he seems to have a completely contrary view. Now, this analysis is very useful for us because it can start to show differences in attitude, and we think that information would be very important to relay back to members so they can see where the differences in opinion are coming and where perhaps they can tackle some of those issues. And then we asked people to give us their own honest view about best practice and what they thought was important and what they thought could be done better. And here are 2 statements from people concerning best practice. We had an awful lot of this kind of information that came back. So the first person here says that buy-in from senior management is key. There's a lot of technology available on the market. It has to pass the cost-benefit analysis within the period of the project, which is normally 12 to 18 months. And in his opinion, a man with a pen is usually cheaper than a PDA. And the second person here is making a statement with regard to IT support, the IT support function within their company, having a better understanding of the conditions the users work in. And this probably goes back to the Phase 1 report, which talked about this shiny shoes and dirty boots principle, that even within your own company you may have a support function that just does not have an understanding of what's going on out in the field. they're not integrated enough into the business process to understand it. So this person is talking about getting those people out into the field instead of talking about it. Ensure that the power users and the content experts receive training, allowing them to understand the process and methodology used so they can completely answer any open-ended questions that people are going to ask them instead of speaking from a script. So we have an awful lot of this information here. And what I want to talk to you about now is what Andy and I plan to do prior to the deadline for producing the report in April. And this is where we need your support, and this is where we need your feedback. So from what you've heard today, we need your feedback as to whether we're heading the right direction, whether we're answering the right questions. We are going to take the themes from our analysis of the questionnaire, and we will want to conduct a number of interviews with people in companies who have experience of implementing technology, or they may have been people who have had technology implemented on them, if that's the right way of expressing it. So we need companies who are prepared to work with us, FIATech and COMIT members. We need access to projects, and we need access to pertinent and relevant case studies. And we need access to individuals, site staff, project staff within technology companies, people who have the experience, the real-world experience of trying to sell this kind of technology to the industry and trying to implement it on site to the point of activity worker. And that experience is going to be invaluable to us when we start to explore some of these themes in a bit more detail. So we will transcribe those interviews, so you need to bear that in mind. We will analyze it. There's a piece of software at Loughborough University called NVivo, which would enable us to, should we choose to use it, which will enable us to take out some of the themes and identify what is being said by the people. And then we want to develop those themes into a final report that's going to be of value and use to the FIATech and COMIT members. And again, this is an area where we need some help and guidance, and fairly quickly from you. And then we aim to complete the report in April. I will be producing an interim presentation at FIATech's Technology Showcase in Austin. So probably along the lines of what you've seen now, but with a lot more content, a lot more information, and probably we will have conducted the interviews by then. I'll be able to give a bit more feedback. Andy and I have talked about, from an academic point, what theoretical stands, rather than strands, apologies for the spelling mistake, that we need to incorporate within the final report. So a lot of people talk about mobility. And since we're talking about mobility and not fixed ICT, we need to understand what is meant by mobility. And then we're talking about capabilities, and I've discussed that in our analysis, you know, that the integrating and transformation of information, interpreting it, storing it, sharing it, collaborating, communicating. And then what we need to do is identify what work processes we are particularly interested in centering the report around. And then perhaps more importantly, particularly to the audience of this webinar, what are the business benefits? How are they measured? How can we measure them? And what are the ones that are intangible, that are less measurable? You know, what is the real impact of this technology on our industry? And then generally we need to look at the factors that lead to an innovation or a new technology being adopted or rejected by a group of users. So these are our thoughts about it, and we would welcome your comments on that. So we need your feedback. Here are the contact details for myself and for Andy May. If you drop us a line, drop us an email, we'd be happy to talk to you about the work we're doing, and we would welcome an opportunity to work with you to test some of the findings that we've come up with. From a COMIT point of view, we have a website. You'll find it by searching it on Google, just construction opportunities for mobile IT. You'll see some of our live projects, COMIT's live projects on there. We have produced in the past and continue to produce case studies and demonstration projects around mobile IT. They're either single one-page documents that capture evidence of what we call best practice of new and innovative mobile technologies, but we also produce a longer 10-page demonstration projects which will talk about processes, how they have changed, how they're influenced by that technology, and what the measurable business benefits are. So I just wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of myself and Andy to thank you for your time today. I hope you found what we've talked about today of interest. I'll give Andy a quick opportunity to fill in any blanks that I might have missed, and then we would both be very happy to take questions from you. Andy, I don't know whether you wanted to add any more.
No, I was just going to say, Neil, that I think you've covered most of it pretty well. I think I'll just reiterate the point that we are looking for feedback, both in terms of what we've done so far, what aspects we've focused on, but also particularly what you think we should be doing in the future. So the types of people we should be talking to, the aspects perhaps in terms of people or business processes that we should be focusing on, and also perhaps even how we best represent the results. So obviously, as Neil's alluded to, we're going to do a final report and a presentation at the members' conference. But there might be some better ways of representing the results. So, for example, we could do some online material, perhaps some audio, or some video clips. So any ideas are very welcome. Okay, Neil.
Okay. Over to you, Nicole. If there's any questions.
Great. There is a question. Gentleman wants to know, he says, you talked about ruggedized PC and PDAs, but did not mention any of the later generation devices and operating systems that increase usability and adoption. And he has a link to Apple page with the iPhone and some of the later technologies that have recently come on the market. Sure. His question is whether or not you've done any research on these technologies or if you're planning to in the future.
The answer is, from a COMIT point of view, and that's probably the best way to answer it, is that not as much as we would like. They are technologies we are aware of. We are probably would like to throw that back at him and say, if his company would like to engage with our organization and give us access to some information on where that is showing real benefit in the industry and help us capture that and share that with our community, we would be delighted to. I mean, in the early days of COMIT, we have gradually broadened out from very, very humble beginnings and a very narrow, restricted view of mobile technology, and we have tried to broaden that out as far as we can. So the answer to that question is no, but we would definitely like to.
Another. This one was just clarification. I think that's all the questions I have, Neil.
Okay.
Do you have a time frame for completing the research or doing the research?
We really need to have some of the key themes buttoned up and explored, you know, in the next sort of month or so. And we also want to start conducting these interviews and have access to case studies fairly quickly, I would say. Andy, is that right?
Yes, that's right. And I think we now want to draw a line under the questionnaire. We've got a little bit more analysis to do, but I think there's a danger of sort of trying to milk it, and I think we want to draw a line under that and now use the results from the questionnaire to focus on the case studies. So getting out there and actually talking to people and tackling the issues that seem to be most important to the people out in construction.
Great. Do you want to give Neil your contact information so folks can follow up with you directly?
Sure. What I'll do is I just go back a few slides and show. So there are the email addresses for myself and Andy. I think you can also get to me via the FIATech website. I'm a European project manager for FIATech as well. So I think if you go to the FIATech website, you can contact me via there as well. So. Yeah, I do have
one more question, and this one's a bit interesting. Is the American industry receptive to your message, or do they generally feel that mobile IT is well established in something they already use? Or is it the case that mobile IT isn't required because telecommunication companies can provide fixed lines quickly.
Well,
So
that's an interesting.
The question between Europe and the U.S.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because there's some dimensions to that. I would say personally that there is a difference in attitude between the UK and the US. That just may be a cultural thing, a natural British reserve and reticence to new technology. There's certainly that. There is a difference, obviously, in technology. You mentioned rapid site setup there, which is something that's particularly dear to my heart because I had tremendous problems working for a civil engineering company, working not in conurbation areas, out in the wilderness, trying to get fixed lines to there in a timely manner on projects that are often, only lasting 2 to 3 months. If you'd asked me that question 5 or 6 years ago, I'd have said Europe was ahead of the US. But I think the US has rapidly caught up, and certainly in cities and certain states, the ability to get fixed lines to sites quickly is far superior to what we're experiencing in the UK. So as the simple answer to that question is, there are differences. There are lots of differences at different levels, and probably more than I can explain at the moment, but I'd be happy to share them with that. Particularly if you want to put that individual on to me and contact me, I'll happily discuss that offline.
Well, great. I think we have just about run out of time, right on time, in fact. I do want to remind everyone that we have recorded the session, and we'll be posting it on the FIATech website in the media library later this week. It usually takes a few days to package it all and post it. We have just had a cancellation this morning for next week's webinar. So our next one will be on February 9th, taking a look at lifecycle building information modeling, data workflow from design and construction to facility management and operations and management and back. So I hope you'll be able to join us February 9th. You'll be receiving emails on that. And please do follow up with Neill and Andy on any specific questions you may have. With that, thanks, everyone. Thank you, Neill and Andy, very much for your time today, and have a great day.